Welcome to this narrated video about conclusions. Like the introduction video, this video is going to cover some of the common mistakes made in conclusions, as well as some of the techniques that will help you create a sense of closure and do all the things that a conclusion is supposed to do. So firstly, before we get into what a conclusion is supposed to do, let's talk about the way it's supposed to look, what it's supposed to be. So obviously it's that part that comes at the end. You can't end your essay without having some kind of what we would call a conclusion. Even if you just taper off, that's still some kind of conclusion. Usually thought about as the last few paragraphs, but I think thinking of it as a percentage, so maybe a fifth of the paper. Because think, if you have a long, like a thesis, it's going to take pages to wrap everything up, and even it might even be a whole chapter that's just conclusion. So in an essay that's 5 to 6 pages, it's a large paragraph might do it. In a one-page paper, a large paragraph is going to be way more than you need. Function. So, like I mentioned, creates a sense of closure. Just like we talked about in the introduction, the audience is going to have a certain mindset when they come into your reading your paper. And so the introduction gets them into the textual world. The conclusion is the opposite. So it helps ease them back into the real world, out of the textual world that you're crafting. So pursues implications. Um, this can be tricky because sometimes pursuing implications actually comes across as introducing a new element to the essay, which we'll talk later is one of the things that you don't want to do. The difference, though, is that pursuing implications, the implications that you're pursuing are very central to your essay. They're things you've been talking about the entire time. And this is a nod in the direction that something is going to happen that you're not able to discuss in this essay. It's not part of the scope of this essay, but it's still there, and acknowledging that is fine. That's a good way to go. So, for example, in an essay arguing that Puerto Rico should be a state, you might end with some, you know, what would happen, if that were the case, or um, after the fact, if that actually happened, And those are implications that are really central to the essay, but aren't new things. Identifies limitations, and part of this last implications might be, there's a much more complicated topic than I have been able to do justice to, but here's some general things that I would talk about if I had enough time to. David Rosenwasser and Jill Stevens say, like the introduction, the conclusion has a key social function. It escorts the reader out of the paper, just as the introduction has escorted them in. What do readers want as they leave the textual world you have taken them through? Think of the concluding paragraph as the site of the paper's final "so what," which, as you'll recall, is shorthand for "where does this get us?" or "why does this matter?" Um, that's one of the key questions you can ask yourself in any part of your paper. The "so what." Why did I just say that? Why did I write this claim? If you can answer that, especially in the conclusion, that's a good sign that you have a good handle and that you're being persuasive or you're being informative, or that the function that you want your paper to do, it's actually being successful. Okay, let's continue with some of the ways that you can do a conclusion that is not very productive. So problematic conclusions are repetitive, and this is tricky because a lot of the times in high school, grade school, we're taught that all the conclusion is uh, a repeat of the introduction, and I don't think it has to be that way, especially because that's kind of doing a disservice to your audience, where you're just assuming that they're not going to remember the introduction. It's not giving credit to them enough. Um, there's more that a conclusion can do. So raise a totally new point. Again, that's a point that isn't necessarily central to your essay, or it's not wrapped up quite as much as it could be or should be. Um, just hanging out there in the conclusion, especially if it's something that should have been in your essay. So uh, if you say, well, this is all true except maybe this one thing, the end. Um, that should have been part of the essay. So overstating the position. As we write our essay, it's really tempting to claim that it's so important that the answer to this, because that's what you want. I mean, you want to answer the so what to your audience, and sometimes it can come out a little bit stronger than it should have. In the hypothetical Puerto Rico as a state essay, you might end with, oh, and if they became a state, all their problems would be over, their economy would boom, and all of, I don't know what you would say, but that's not going to happen just by gaining statehood. It might be part of a process, but be very careful on what you claim is going to happen and how you portray your side of the essay. Ends in anticlimax. So claiming more than it should, or just not ending on a high note. I mean, the last line should be memorable, should preferably have a connection to the rest of the essay. But when it doesn't, when you just kind of taper off, that's anticlimactic. Your audience doesn't isn't left with a very favorable view of your essay. Okay, so concluding techniques, refer back to the introduction. So if you and you'll probably want to refer to the introduction video for a list of those. But whatever you put in the introduction, that's what you put in your conclusion. Issue a warning or prediction, particularly if it's a persuasive essay, you're going to want to have that kind of language, or consider that you should. Call for action or reform, describe a powerful image, or ask a rhetorical question. End with a quote. So each of these techniques are going to leave your audience with the kind of feeling that you want to. They're going to be impressed. They're going to have a sense of closure, all the things that you want. And so now, to follow my own advice, let me end with a prediction. So if you can master concluding your essay in a powerful way, that will be a skill that will help you through the rest of your college career with future employers, future boyfriends or girlfriends. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, thank you, and see you in the comments.